Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Uh, um, so a lot has been happening in the States over the last week or so. And so I have done a lot of reflecting as a result. And uh, I am the sum of all my conditioning. I am what has come together in cause and condition. And I'm in this form now. And soon I will fall away. Um, when the Buddha was when the Buddha was before he became enlightened, he was he had left his friends and they went off and to meditate and do their thing, and he went out by himself. And uh, at some point, he decided that he was going to go somewhere else to find a place to sit. And he met, I believe it was a girl who presented him with some kusha grass, and it's a very soft grass. Um, and he thought it was a very good sign for himself, Gautama. And so it was at that time that he found himself sitting underneath we know as the Bodhi tree. Uh, Now, the interesting thing is when he sat down, he said to himself, "There's no way I'm going to get up from this. I'm going to sit here, come hell or high water. I'm going to sit here and find a way out of suffering, find some sort of path for myself." And it was that determination, right? That determination was an idea that he had in his mind. He didn't know for sure that that was going to happen. He had no idea, but he was determined, and he had this idea that, you know what? No, I've come this far, and I'm going to do this, right? And so there's determination, there's an idea, there's a thought, there's a concept of what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to go for it. And fortunately for all of us, he was able to awaken. Um, but during that time, in that struggle, he was sitting, and Mara is, you can say it was the demon or the devil, was coming and trying to knock him off his square. In other words, just kind of push him away, saying, "You don't need this." And there's some in Karen Armstrong's book, The Buddha. She has some descriptions of this. But the struggle was not over yet. Gautama still had to fight these residual forces within himself, which clung to un, uh, the unregenerate, excuse me, unregenerative life, and did not want the ego to die. So she's saying that there's a part of him that that ego self did not want to let go of, and he didn't want to let go of. Mara Gautama's shadow self appeared before him, decked out like a world ruler, a massive army. Mara himself was mounted on an elephant, was 150 leagues high. He had sprouted 1,000 arms, and each of these brandished deadly weapons. And then he epitomized the ignorance which holds us back from enlightenment. Since as a ruler could only vestige a victory achieved by physical force. At this time, Gautama was not fully enlightened, and he tried to respond in kind, seeing the virtues he acquired, defensive weapons as a sword or a shield that would destroy this deadly army. Right? Despite Mara's power, Gautama was sitting in the unconquerable position that we find ourselves in today. And we're sitting here in meditation, right? And what I want to kind of allude to is that this past week has been a massive showing of our conditioning, of our ego, because of our judgments, because of how we responded within ourselves. This has nothing to do with the other people out there. This has everything to do with ourselves. And my conditioning was rabid. My ego was rabid. My certainty was rabid. It didn't matter. I was right. And I was going to be right. So how do we move in this? Because the worldly and the condition states, well, you got to make a choice. You got these situations, and I don't agree with this, and I agree with this. I don't want this. I want that. And we have these situations that we cannot get out of because we have to make choices in our lives. And they're not always easy. Right? How do we deal with that as Buddhists? Well, we can't always be and try to be serene, right? This is where mindfulness comes in and kicks us in the butt and reminds us. The Buddha sat down and he was determined, and he was not passive, but he was peaceful. He sat down and he thought to himself, you know what? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it regardless. And he was peaceful about it. And there's that resolution, that resolute part of us that's always there, despite what we say to ourselves about the world around us. This past week really brought Buddhism home to me because of how my conditioning took me for a ride. I mean, I was on a ride. And when we listen to the Heart Sutra, we know things are empty of self. Cause and conditions have come together in our world and presented itself as such. And 100 years from now, it will all have been a mirage. It's empty. And we know this. So lean into your practice. Don't try, lean into your practice and reflect on how do I find that still point again? How do I find ground again with myself when I end up going to whatever it doesn't even have to be politics. It could be anything. It could be sports is another analogy that I find myself wrapped up in. Just my team. My team stinks right now. They're awful, right? And I can just go and I could chew someone's head off, right? But the point is it's not the team. It's not them. It's me. And Buddha showed it so beautifully because he's resolute and he sits there and he's peaceful and he's determined. And he's not going to shy away, but he's not going to lump someone's head in. I mean, he's not going to knock someone's head in. It's truly all about ourselves. It's truly all about how am I cultivating compassion and wisdom in my life, despite the noise. What ifs are abound? What could be happening? And so there's two Zen stories, but one of them, and they're so well known, and I'm sure you've heard them. One of them is the two monks. One was a novice monk, one was another monk, and they were traveling, and they went through this town, and they came across. There was this river in front of them, and then there was this lady this girl that didn't want to go across the river because she didn't want her dress to get wet, and so the elder monk picked her up and crossed the river and put her down. Well, that was a big deal because you weren't supposed to touch women. You weren't supposed to defile yourself like that. You were a monk. You were to be within and not have those kind of interactions. And so they were traveling. He set her down and they went about their way and they were going. And then a little while later, the novice monk said to him, "Teacher, you picked her up. What are you doing? You're a monk. You can't be doing that." And the elder monk said, "I put her down a while ago, and you're still carrying her." Right? So the idea is that we know ourselves. When the Buddha was sitting and Mara was coming after him and they were shooting arrows, all the army was, and all these, and then they turned, these massive amounts of arrows were turning into flower petals raining around him. It's not because he had some supernatural power. No. The Buddha knew himself. He understood himself. There was no way any amount of insults or any type of influence was going to push him off his goal because he knew himself. And we've all experienced that. We've all experienced it. And I'm sure you can search back in your life where you were like, "Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I don't need to, go along to get along. I know myself enough." And that's a very peaceful place to be. The Buddha knew himself. He was not going to be moved. We all have that within us. And we also have our conditioning that we carry. I'm trying to think of the other story, and it's not coming to my mind. The point being, though, is let's look if you've been really happy with the results. You could be very happy with the results, or you could be very angry with the results. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's all conditioning because it's all about these ideas and concepts and notions that we have about what the truth is, what life is. And all life really is.
Thank you, Sue. Wonderful, appropriate